Yes, I'll get it.
Good evening. Today is Monday, October 27th, 2025. It's 5:30 p.m. And according to today's agenda, we're going to have item A, Brian McCain, Chief of Staff, 5-minute presentation.
Thank you, sir. Pueblo Parks and Rec, the Boys Hoopsters Elite Basketball Competitive League, grades 6 through 8. Registration is now through December 5th with a $95 fee per player. Season takes place January 17th through March 7th. You can find out more at pueblo.us/youthsports or call 719-553-2790. Remember, we still have through November 1st for Waste Connections discount days. This offers 50% discounts for City of Pueblo residents to utilize the Waste Connections Southside landfill to make dumping more affordable. Solid waste, trash, yard trimmings, mattress, and box springs are accepted. All loads must be covered and secured to receive the discount. Waste Connections Southside landfill hours are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturday beginning at 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. Waste Connections Southside landfill is located at 5715 West State Highway 78. Join the City of Pueblo on Halloween from 2 to 4 p.m. this Friday for a Touch a Truck and Trunk or Treat event in the parking lot of City Hall along with trick-or-treating inside with departments from across the city. Bring your kids, family, and neighbors to enjoy a safe and unique experience for all on Halloween. And it'll be in the parking lot where you come into City Hall, where Angelo's is down there. We'll have a bunch of trucks set up and equipment for kids to come and check out, and then they could come in the building and get candy. PD updates for October 16th through the 22nd. Last week in patrol, the following occurred in addition to handling almost 2,641 calls for service. DICE had 18 calls for service, 8 COP calls, 28 walker stops, 4 trespass notices issued, 31 citations, 2 PR bonds, 6 municipal warrants, 1 outside warrant, and recovered just over $1,000 of merchandise. Temporary DICE focused on loitering that week. Year-to-date loitering citations are 1,077, which is up 42% from last year at this time, 24 loitering by minors after curfew, and 99 curfew in the park citations. Patrol had 1,189 dispatch calls with 385 that were self-initiated, and the community service officer, CSOs, had 106 total calls for service with 50 self-initiated, 104 as primary, 2 assists, and filed 17 incident reports. And with that, that concludes my updates.
Okay, questions, comments from anybody? Okay, I don't know if is Joe online? I don't see it. No, he said he's going to be on Zoom tonight. Okay. That's what I thought too.
Might have met the meeting.
All right, let's move on to item agenda B, government shutdown effects on SNAP program. Tammy Torres, Director of Pueblo County Department of Human Services. Karen Garcia, Deputy Director, 15-minute presentation. Thank you, ladies. Turn your mics on.
Good evening, Council. Tammy Torres, DHS Director, and Karen Garcia, one of the Deputy Directors here at the department. I did send in okay, so great. You have the PowerPoint in front of you. I also have paper copies if you guys would like some. But we were requested to come and give an update about the government shutdown and the effects that it's going to have on our SNAP program, which is also commonly referred to as food assistance. So currently, you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, or do I control it?
Yeah,
I control it. Okay. Sorry, it was for first time ever presenting here, so I wasn't sure how it goes. So we always start everything with our mission, just to remind folks what it is that we do at the department. So Pueblo County Department of Human Services empowers individuals and families to see their potential and improve their quality of life. That is the reason for our existence. We are safety net programs that help our community in times of need. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just who this affects and what it means. So as of last Wednesday, so it's only been 4 business days since we got this notification, we learned that the issuance of SNAP would not be occurring in the month of November. So what does that mean for our community? Currently, our total population is about 168,162 individuals. Of those, we serve with our SNAP program about 41,241. That means about 1 in every 4 individuals in Pueblo receive SNAP benefits. Those folks, about 14,000 of them are 0 to 17-year-olds, 21,244 are 18 to 60-year-olds, and 5,862 are over the age of 61. So these are all comprised into what we call households. So we serve approximately 22,889 households. I always like to give people some background about what those households entail. So of those households, 6,298 have earned income, which means they are currently working and earning some kind of paycheck. 11,075 are households with unearned income, meaning that they are on a monthly fixed income. That can be from retirement, that can be from disability, that can be veterans, and that can also be child support or alimony, either anything that is unearned doesn't vary from month to month. It's a very fixed income. And then we have about 7,009 individuals with no income. And of those 7,009 who have no income, it's a very small population, less than 3,000 that are what we would consider ABODs. So those are able-bodied adults without dependents. So those are folks 18 to now 64 who have the ability to work, who don't qualify for another waiver. So they don't have a child under the age of 14 that they're taking care of. They're not homeless. They don't have any other barriers to employment. So that's about 3,000 folks who qualify as what we would refer to as ABODs. Do you want me to do the whole presentation and then take questions afterwards? Okay. So the next thing is that we presented to the county. Last week, I was asked to do the same presentation that we did to the county. The Department of Human Services found approximately $195,874 that we can help contribute to the community efforts around filling the gap. So every month, Pueblo County issues about $8 million in SNAP to our Pueblo participants. That means $8 million will not be going to individuals and families to supplement their food purchases this month. That also means that $8 million isn't going to go into our economy. So local food merchants will not be getting the $8 million that they're typically used to getting. There is documentation that about 85% of SNAP participants spend their entire allotment within the first 2 weeks of the month. So we did ask the state for what we call a zero balance report. We wanted to know how many individuals and households were going to be going into November with no benefits on their card at all. So we got that information back. It's around 4,000 folks, 4,000 households that will be going into the month of November with no food assistance on their card. However, that does not mean that the person who had a penny on their card or 10 cents on a card, those are not accounted for. These are people who had nothing, zero balance on their card. So there are going to be several more families and households that will be going into November with limited funds on their cards. So we came together as a department to see what funding we can kind of gather, and we came up with some recommendations for the commissioners. So of that $195,000, we're going to be able to help households who have at least one child in the home and have at least their family of 4 income cannot exceed $75,000 a year. So anybody who recognizes these eligibility requirements, they're the broad-based eligibility requirements for our TANF program, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. I tend to use acronyms a lot, so if you have questions about those, just please let me know. But that's the funding that we're going to be able to use. So that's the population that we'll be able to help, is folks with families who have children in the home and under that $75,000 annual income threshold. So the recommendations that we made were for $60,000 to be given to a partnering agency, so Catholic Charities, in order to buy $150 gift cards for households. They've already opened up that application process, and they've actually closed that application process already. From the meeting this morning, it sounds like they had over 2,000 applications And so the $60,000 that we're giving them will be able to help about 400 households. We are also partnering with the Pueblo Food Project and giving $60,000 to them. They'll be using that $60,000 to purchase local food off of the shelves from local small business owners. So whether that's small supermarkets, locally owned supermarkets, locally owned meat markets, locally owned farm goods, they're going to use those funds to purchase and stock the community pantry that then smaller pantries can take from. And so it's really important that we support our small businesses at this point in time. Again, because most of these merchants have already ordered the anticipated amount of food that they thought they were going to sell in November. And now there's not going to be the funds to move that food off the shelf. And so we're trying to make sure that we have the small amount of waste for those perishable items that they've ordered. Let's see what else. So then we also reserved about $30,000 for prepared hot meals. Because we're unsure of how long this government shutdown is going to last, we needed to be able to offer pantry food. But should the pantries run low, we want our community to be able to at least access one hot meal a day for families. And so we're currently working with a nonprofit to see if they're going to be able to increase the capacity to do that family style hot individual prepared meals. So I should know more about that tomorrow once I hear back from that agency. And then we set aside about $45,874 for what we're calling a reserve funds for future needs or some of the ripple effects that might come from this this crisis, as we're calling it, right? So come November 1st, rents are going to be due. You're no longer going to have SNAP on your EBT on your SNAP card, so you're going to have to choose. Do you want to fulfill the immediate need of filling my children's tummies, or am I going to have to pay rent? And so we believe that families are going to choose the more immediate need. And so that could mean that the end of November, because they've spent most of their income on groceries that was unexpected, that they might then struggle for rent or for any kind of utility bill. So we're saving those for what we call ripple effects in case there is an increase in delinquent rents or delinquent utility bills. We'll be able to help in that manner. Or in case the government shutdown lasts longer, where we would need more money to fill pantries, that money can be used for that as well. I believe that is all we have formally to present, but we're willing to answer any questions that you all might have about how this is going to affect our Pueblos community.
Counselor Flores, please. Counselor Martinez, didn't see you.
You gave a lot of numbers, and the the amount of money the county is going to provide to support the gift cards and the households with at least one child. What is that amount of individual households that you're going to be touching there? And can you separate the two numbers, the people you serve now versus what you're going to be able to do with this $195,000?
Sure. So the people we serve, the amount of economic impact that we serve now is $8 million every month is distributed on EBT cards. And clearly the $195,000 that the county found is not going to be enough to fill that gap. There is going to be a significant gap in our community. We have a lot of community partners coming together to meet. We've already met twice in the last 4 business days to figure out who can cover an increase in the amount of people coming through pantries, who can do something different in terms of who they're able to serve. So clearly there's going to be a very large gap between the $8 million and the $195,000 that we were able to find to help with this situation.
Tell me your relationship with Care and Share, and would it benefit more, I guess, if you were to use the same money just to have Care and Share provide food to individuals?
Sure. At the department, we also have what we call temporary food assistance program, TPAP. And that's through our commodities program on the east side. We have a warehouse where we distribute boxes of food as well. So we are a care and share provider at the department. And then a lot of the pantries in Pueblo are also care and share partners. Care and share has been at all of the community meetings, so that has been great. And if the JBC approves the emergency funding for the food banks, care and share will get a portion of that. It sounds like the estimate that they gave on last week, I think we met Thursday or Friday, I can't remember, versus what they gave today is different. They're not exactly sure, but because they serve 20-something counties in southeastern Colorado, we're going to receive some, but not all of what Care and Share is allotted. And what it sounds like is Care and Share, once it's approved, will get that funding and they'll use that funding to purchase food. The problem is the food won't get to Pueblo till about 2 or 3 weeks out, right? So they have to procure that food. The food has to be delivered, then it has to be sorted out to all of the different pantries, and then it can get in the hands of our community. But that looks like it's going to be about 3 weeks out. So we're trying to fill that first 2-week gap of how is our community going to eat in the next 2 weeks based off of the gap that currently exists. And so that's why Pueblo County chose to fund the local pantry so they can buy the food that's already on the shelves from local small business owners so that we can then get that food into the pantries right away versus waiting. When Care and Share gets their distribution, it will certainly be helpful. But unfortunately, it's not going to be quick enough. The first is Saturday, and we want to make sure that people have food this weekend and going into next week.
Has the state of Colorado, have you been in contact with the state as to whether they're going to provide any resources to Pueblo County?
So it is a statewide issue. This is a national issue. It's not just a Colorado issue. This is the federal government has historically given 100% of the actual benefit to customers. And so this is a nationwide issue. We meet weekly with the Colorado Department of Human Services. And right now the relief that's coming is hopefully through the JBC with allocating $10 million to food banks. And then they also have a second bill in front of them to help fund WIC through the end of November, because WIC will also be affected by the government shutdown.
I don't know if you know the federal rules on this, but let's assume that they open up December 1 and they have not provided I guess the question is in reverse. If everything goes back into place December 1, will we get paid for November?
So we got recent guidance, recent as a Friday, that said, should federal government funding be available, people could potentially receive back pay. So those are some very ambiguous language that they're probably using on purpose. So there is no guarantee, but I think there's a hope that if there's funding, federal funding, that those participants will receive the past months that were missed. So right now, if we go into December 1, they would have missed all of November. Just to be clear, even if the government shutdown ends before the end of October, because we still have this week, benefits will still be delayed because there's no way for the federal government to get Colorado the $120 million that we issue every month in Colorado. The federal government has to give us that funds, the state, and then the state gives it to our vendor, and our vendor has to put it on the cards. And our vendor also services 40 other states in the United States. So it's a tall order for that provider to do something outside of their normal distribution. So there will be delays even if the government is back open by the end of this month.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Council Martinez.
Thank you, Ms. Torres, for coming and talking about this. This has been something that's been keeping me up at night. And as someone who's married to a federal employee, not receiving paychecks now, I can't imagine what it's like to be a SNAP recipient. So I have a couple of questions, and first I want to start with kudos because I've been involved in those meetings for, the past, you said 4 days, and that blows my mind. And I really appreciate, Tammy, how you you took charge, you were a leader in those meetings. And I have to tell our commissioner friends and Sabina just how great you were. Seriously, I really was in awe of your leadership in those meetings.
Thank you.
So a couple of things. One, who's doing your hot meals?
So the provider that we've requested to do the hot meals would be the soup kitchen.
Okay,
But they have, she has to take it to her board and then see how much it would cost to do one hot meal from now till the end of December. And then what it would cost to increase their staff capacity to create that space for individuals and families. Because I think we all agree that it would be better to have two separate hot meals, a family hot meal, and then the normal population that they serve.
okay, so different times of the day.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Have you heard anything from D60 of if they're planning on continuing their food distribution programs?
I have not heard anything from D60. We could certainly reach out to them and see what their plans are. I know that I've seen individual schools doing food drives for families that are affected at those specific schools. But I haven't seen anything from the district. I know
Okay,
as a parent of a District 60 student, I've received the calls that say, if your family needs resources, here's 211. But I haven't heard from them directly in my role at the department.
okay. And then for the Catholic Charities, so 2,000 families applied by the end of Friday. This proposal can only feed or help 400 households. What, do you know what Catholic Charities is gonna do for that gap?
So I believe they had to filter through that list to see how, because our requirements are Pueblo County resident and family. So I think they're going to filter and see how many and try and categorize those folks. How many were federal furloughed employees? How many are Pueblo residents? How many are Pueblo residents with kids? So I think they were doing some filtering and we're going to let us know what that number looked like. And so they're working as fastly
Okay.
and diligently as they can as well.
But this was the money that we're able to find and contribute to Catholic Charities. They had already started this, so they already had applicants.
Right,
So this is an additional funds for them to continue that.
okay. So because I've been sitting on those conversations, I want to let council know that I have been working with our attorney's office to write an ordinance to help cooperative care. So as I like how Tammy said it, to fund food purchases for community food banks. That's what cooperative care does. I was hoping to get it on and as an emergency ordinance, but because it's technically a grant per charter, I can't do an emergency ordinance for a grant. So unfortunately, it has to go through the full process. So the first reading for that will be November 10th. The final reading will be November 24th. And it'll be $50,000 out of the ARPA interest account for cooperative care. The reason why it was cooperative care is because, to Tammy's point earlier, Karen Share is going to be receiving on Friday. It was like $700,000 just specifically for the county. And then with the 3-week procurement delay, cooperative care can get things quickly ordered. And then Mayor Graham's office has graciously stepped forward to fill the gap funding as we're waiting on the first reading on November 10th and then last week reading on November 24th.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I want families to get fed.
Yes, yeah. And that's what we talked about a little bit today. I think, the funding we have will help families. Today's meeting was, there's some concerns for those gaps. So this funding that we're giving them will not be able to help individuals without children. Pantry food is really hard for homeless to eat and prepare, right? So you're getting boxes of food that would require a microwave or a stove and pots and pans to create a meal. So we also talked about how else could we help our homeless population, who's probably more used to buying stuff at convenience stores and warming them up after the purchase in that convenience store. So we're still brainstorming some ways to potentially help those specific populations as well.
My last question, Tammy, is so all of that's happening right now, what's the county's promotional plan to get this out to families?
So we're really relying on United Way. So United Way has been an amazing partner in this. The second it came out, we reached out to Shanna, knowing that she kind of can sometimes spearhead that nonprofit world and wrap their arms around us. So that's what we've done. Their agency is working on a lot of communication. They've done the press releases. We really want this to be a community effort I need my staff to continue to focus on the paperwork part of our job. So we'll still be receiving applications, we'll still be receiving redeterminations and changes. And we really need them to continue to focus on that so that once the government opens back up, a paperwork delay is not what's impeding, is not the next barrier to receiving those benefits. And so we really needed a community effort and nonprofit. So United Way has been doing a lot of that work.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other council? Councilor Flores, please. No, you're fine.
Governments like the city and the county, we are probably both going through a budget process right now. And we make a big deal out of what we call a surplus that we need, which is normally about 2 months of additional funds that we carry for a rainy day. I can't think of a better rainy day in a crisis than this. And I would like to suggest that both the city and the county put in real money into this to really make a significant dent. When you're talking about 200,000, and if the city contributed another 200,000, we're talking about a relatively small dent in this problem. And I really think that this council, who really controls the purse strings, that we consider giving this a lot more attention, a lot more money, and really, even if we have to use our surplus, the surplus is for situations like this, a catastrophe. This is a catastrophe that equals anything that Mother Nature would throw at us when our government has given up on us. And I say that because I would like for the council and the administration to consider putting more money this month into that and really making a dent out of our surplus. That's what it's there for a situation that's a catastrophe. And I'm hoping that I can talk to the county commissioners to really do something significant here in the short run until our government decides to get their act together. There's no question there. It's just a statement on our part. I'll be talking to the rest of the counselors and I'll be thinking about what that number should be in the short term. And obviously, if the money comes back in some form, we can reimburse ourselves. I doubt the way the government's going now that the things are going to run smoothly. It's just not in the cards. But thank you for coming tonight and explaining this dire need.
Councilor Martinez.
Just to follow up on that, Councilor Flores, the reason why I did out of the ARPA interest account, but one thing that we're not talking about too is WIC families, who that's also a federally funded program. And that's, I mean, so the state right now has enough resources to have WIC through the end of November is what I'm hearing. But if this government shutdown, lasts, we're going to have to increase the reach that we have and the amount that we have for our WIC families. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving parts to it. WIC serves 0 to 5. And so, but it's also a supplemental program, right? They're not issuing enough formula for the child for the whole month. It's just a supplement, just like food assistance is a supplement to their total budget for that month. And so when there's no longer that supplement for formula or other items, how can we as a community come together and really make sure that we're thinking of all sectors that this will affect, right? So it'll affect families, it'll affect individuals. And I'm sure there's things that we haven't thought of yet. And so we would also encourage people to reach out if they have ideas or if they have populations that they think are going to be missed and they want to bring that to our attention. Absolutely reach out to us and we'll make sure that they're in the conversation.
Okay. Anybody else? I've got one thing I'd like to add. Real quick, I'm going to work on trying to get the restaurants that have closed all around town, maybe they consider, we're gonna open our restaurant that's been closed for a while as a distribution point for food drives. It's just that they're all over town and would save a lot because people say, well, I got the food, now what do I do? So we'll start that. I'm gonna look at it sometime next week to try to get that done, but reaching out to all the restaurants that are closed and maybe they could open up for a day and help people out, but that's just an idea. Anybody got anything else before we go? I think we're good. Thank you. If you have anything else, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Mr. Caleb, would you mind going to say? I'm sorry, item C. I was trying to get out of here on time. Item C. No, go ahead, Council Flores.
Are we on,
Item C, I'm sorry. Yeah, I jumped it.
yes, we've had some conversations here recently about the ICE ICE presence in our community. And I thought it would be instructive to have someone come talk to us about our immigration laws, talk a little bit about the rights that people have. And the most important question is whether or not the city of Pueblo is going to be complicit with lots of ugly stuff that's happening through our system of enforcement, also known as ICE. So I've asked Mr. John Arona and Richard Arona, who is Richard Arona, who and his son John will make a presentation and kind of give us a lay of the land of what's going on here in the community. And hopefully we'll have a better picture of whether or not, the city of Pueblo is going to be what we can be doing as a community in this issue. It's very, very important nationally. I'd like to ask Mr. Arona, both Aronas, to come forward and thank you for being here tonight.
Turn your mics on, gentlemen, please. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilman, Councilwoman, Mayor. Thank you for allowing us to present today on this very, very important topic. My name is Richard Arona. I am the managing partner at Arona Garcia Galvez, a firm here in Pueblo. Alongside me is actually my son, who is also a practicing attorney. He just graduated from Cornell Law, passed the bar here recently. And I thought I'd bring him here to Pueblo to practice a little bit of big law before he goes off to Manhattan and practice with an international firm, Sidley in Austin. He's here today in particular because he has had some experience in this area. During law school, he interned with the U.S. Attorney's Office, so he's familiar with the Department of Justice. He also interned with a clinic that was very unique to Cornell, where they flew students from Cornell into these detention centers throughout the United States to provide legal services to those that are detained. So he can provide some insight into exactly what may come before this council with regard to any type of relationship with ICE. So with that, I turn that over to Mr. Arona.
Okay, so let's first start with a disclaimer. Thank you, everyone. First of all, we're not in the capacity of representing any person or entity. We're not here to provide any legal advice. Instead, we're providing information for discussion so that you can be better informed about the situation in our community. So what brings us here today is specifically the Washington Post reported on and released a ICE internal memo which signaled out different communities across the United States to expand detention practices. In particular, Huerfano County was identified as an area in which ICE expansion could occur. There is a now, not defunct, but it hasn't been in operation for over a decade, Huerfano County Correctional Facility. And ICE has targeted that to be expanded upon and used for their detention practices. That correctional facility is privately run by a private corporation named CoreCivic. In addition to the ICE internal memos, CoreCivic has posted job openings for this detention center. That was in July. It has a 75 or 752 bed capacity right now, but they're looking to expand upon that. Additionally, Walsenburg city officials have made public and private comments suggesting that the correctional facility will reopen. Now, I'm talking about this because it has connection to Pueblo as well. ICE practice right now is to detain individuals across the United States, and then they will fly them to different communities for various reasons. Maybe they don't have enough capacity to house undocumented immigrants in their home state, or they may be looking to ensure that undocumented immigrants will not be able to arrive at their court proceedings in the state in which they were picked up on. So it's been reported on by the Colorado Newsline and various other outlets that the director of the Pueblo Memorial Aviation Airport has engaged in activities that could eventually lead to city council and the Pueblo mayor deciding on whether the city of Pueblo would like to facilitate these ICE detention flights into Colorado, and then they would undocumented immigrants would be transported from Pueblo's airport to the Huerfano County Correctional Facility. So that's sort of where we're at right now and why we're here.
Okay.
And I want to stress that, you know, any contract that the city might engage in, there are risks. And those risks can be especially profound whenever you're engaging with individuals that have been detained by the federal government. So we're here to discuss potential liability as well. Colorado has passed certain laws, which if you, as a council and mayor, choose to engage in contracts with either the private company CoreCivic or ICE, you may be held liable under state law. So this is something to look out for. Last year, or I guess in 2024, House Bill 23-1100 was implemented, and it essentially bans and outlaws local municipalities from engaging with privately run correctional facilities. So this is a very, very expansive law. It covers contracting with those private facilities, selling government-owned property to those facilities, paying any costs related to receiving any payment from them, or giving financial incentives to provide that private entity the ability to detain undocumented people. In addition to outlawing cooperation with privately run facilities, Colorado has passed a law, it's the same law, which bans local municipalities from entering into a contract with the federal government, particularly ICE, to detain undocumented people. So again, I stressed this before, any sort of contract, it gets murky and there could be state liability even though it's federally legal. And a question you might be asking is, well, of course the federal government can land planes at our Pueblo airport. They have unfettered ability. They control the skies. They control aviation safety. And that's true. You have to let them land if they choose to. But what you don't have to do is contract with them. And they're going to want a contract for a few reasons. First, they're going to want exclusive control of the airport when they land. They're going to want to ensure that security measures are taken in place because of the political climate. They're also going to want to probably ensure that media can't be there to cover some of their practices. Another reason why they might want a contract is because there's going to be flights coming in daily, multiple times a day. The Huerfano County Correctional Facility has a 700 bed capacity, but they're looking to potentially double that. So you're going to be having people come in and out all day. And in order to provide or to save on economic costs, it's likely that the government will probably have multiple planes land in one day, but transport the undocumented individuals once a day. So if a plane lands at 10 and another plane lands at 5, the people that land there at 10 will have to be detained until the people land at 5, and then they can all drive down to Huerfano County. So it's possible that the Pueblo airport will have to set up a temporary detention facility, which could then impose liability on the city. Even aside from legal liability, a question that has to be asked is, do you want to engage in the detention of undocumented peoples? And I think this is something that I can speak to because, like my dad said, I went into these detention facilities and provided legal advice to them, over 200 clients. And even though the immigration detention is civil in nature, most people don't realize that it's not criminal, it's civil. The civil detention centers resemble jails. They're shackled. Individuals wear jumpsuits, coordinated color-wise based off of their level of dangerousness. There's medical care issues, food and conditions of confinement are dangerous. Recently, it was reported at Alligator Alcatraz in Florida that they were being served food with maggots. I know when I met with my clients, they were routinely denied basic medical procedures and services. And so far this year, we've had 20 deaths in ICE's custody. So this is a dangerous situation. Also, legal assistance and religious practices are routinely denied. We had a fight to get into the facilities. There is no right to an attorney in the immigration context. One will not be provided to you like in the criminal context. So it's very difficult to provide these people with representation. Now let's so that's the situation on the ground. That's some of the liability that you could be exposed to. And that's also some of the political pressures that may be placed on the council and the mayor once the conditions of confinement are released to the public. Something else we have to worry about or think about is the overall climate in which this is happening in. And so let's kind of take it on a national level, and then we'll see how that implements or I guess affects Pueblo locally. So the big beautiful bill was just passed, and that allocated 170 billion to immigration enforcement over the next 4 years. And that's a lot of money because this is a large issue. This is a very complex dilemma that we're in. So I think it's important to look at how that funding is allocated. 400% of the funding is for an increase in immigration detention. So that's the rounding up of undocumented people and placing them in civil confinement, which again, I said resemble prisons. And that's compared to a 14% increase in funding for the hiring of immigration judges. So we're all aware that there's a backlog of immigration cases, and we just simply can't handle the demand. But rather than increasing funding for pathways of citizenship, clearing the court system, or anything like that, the large amount of funding is going towards the detaining and then the deporting of people before they've had their due process and their day in court. And the stat that speaks the most to that is that there's been a 0% increase to USCIS, which is the agency that processes legal immigration applications. And they have a backlog of 11.3 million cases. 0% funding increase for the application of legal, or for the processing of legal applications, and a 400% increase for their detention. Lastly, the stated goal of the administration is to deport 1 million undocumented immigrants each year. And so that's sort of the outlay or the overlay of the federal policy. I'm now going to switch it over to Mr. Arona, where he can continue to talk about the change in immigration policy and the interpretation of immigration laws.
So there's clearly been a seismic shift with regard to how the federal government views immigration in general and specifically within the states. What's really important to understand is a lot of, obviously our laws and regulations come from our Constitution. Our framers, when they established the Constitution, subsequent administrations, when they modified it, they had this understanding, this principal understanding that a president, no matter who it is, male or female, Democrat or Republican, will not be able to be free from improper influence and will not be able to maintain such great power that a president would have if there are not checks and balances in place. In fact, our Constitution, the genesis of our Constitution is to ensure and to limit and to mitigate the powers of the president. So they recognize this. We're all human beings, presidents are human beings. When you have that much power, it needs to be regulated. But that only works if all of our laws and regulations are actually adhered to. And that's all we're asking for today, is we're not talking about what should be done as far as if someone is undocumented, how the process should take place and what is right, Republican or Democrat. We're here to say, follow the law as it exists right now. And as it existed for about 160 years, as we'll see going forward. So in looking at that, let's look at the administration's view of what is going on within immigration in the nation as a whole. We have a a quote from, this is from the President Trump. He's been very clear about this. This is not an ambiguous, or I'm not coming in to interpret their position. They've been very clear about what their position is. And he states, when somebody comes in, we must immediately, with no judges or court cases, bring them back from where they came. He describes undocumented people as threatened to pour into and infest our country. Even his own party is offended by some of these statements. Here we see from a Republican, Ross Littman, baseless rhetoric, repugnant, dehumanize those who wish to make a better life for themselves in recognition of and in response to the infestation comment from our president. So what does all that mean? Well, we know that's kind of the mindset that's there, and they've been very clear about this. So it's not ambiguous. So how is all this coming into play with regard to what we do as a community here? Well, we first look to the United States Constitution, and I hope the federal government first looks to the United States Constitution. And if we look in the 14th Amendment, this has been codified for 160 years. It was a product of abolishing slavery. It was passed just a couple of months after President Lincoln was assassinated. But it's a product of his activities as president. And this is what the 14th Amendment says. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. Talks about any person. Doesn't talk about citizens, doesn't talk about non-citizens, doesn't talk about immigrants, doesn't talk about undocumented. Any person. Our founding fathers recognized any person is entitled to these fundamental rights that are a product of who we are as human beings. What's interesting is even the conservative jurists, and we look at Antonin Scalia, Justice Scalia, he even says, it is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitled aliens to due process of law in deportation proceedings. For 160 years, that has been the law, uncontested, unchallenged, till now. So we continue to look on to what else the Constitution provides, because we don't want to just look at one aspect of the Constitution. We want to see, okay, what are our founding fathers, what are they trying to implement? What are the subsequent administrations trying to implement? We look at the Fifth Amendment, states no person, again, not a citizen, not detailing it just to a citizen. No person shall be compelled in a criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process again. No person. Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall have assistance of counsel or his defense. Accused, not citizens. We go on to the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people, not citizens, the right of the people to be in the person's houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. We also look at family integrity, and we've seen this where there's been separation of families, children and families. And I've seen this even on the Democratic side. This is offensive to me, no matter where it's coming from, and I've seen it kind of on both sides. And we have well established historically in our jurisprudence, both federal and state, that this idea of splitting children from their families is fundamentally inhumane. The only time we split families is in extraordinary circumstances where you have abuse and so forth. It's the only time we step in. And again, this right is based on us being humans, not us being United States citizens. It's a human right that our Constitution has recognized for decades. So with that understanding, with all this protection, all this clear, unambiguous language in our Constitution, what are we seeing coming from the federal government? One, we're seeing an attack on habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is the bedrock of who we are as United States citizens. Habeas corpus, if it exists, you're out to be a democratic society. If it doesn't, you're tyrannical. That's truly the litmus test and determine who embraces democracy and who doesn't. Habeas corpus is a legal right that allows a detained person to challenge the legality and the length of their confinement. Government cannot come and put you in jail without at least a hearing, without due process. What is happening right now is the federal government is saying, despite all the protections that we just talked about, is coming in and they want to suspend habeas corpus for undocumented individuals. What's disturbing about this is I'm not even sure they understand what that means. We've seen quotes from the president when he's asked the question, are you going to suspend this? Are you going to suspend habeas? He responds, yeah, suspending who? Oh, I don't know. I'd rather leave that to Christie. Very disturbing. So let's go to Christie. See what Christie has to say about it. He's talking about DHA Secretary Christie Noem. Asked to define habeas corpus, because remember, this is the bedrock of who we are as citizens of this country. Her response, her definition, is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their rights. No, not even close. They're removing something they don't even understand. They're removing something that's the bedrock of who we are as US citizens. But I'll tell you, Stephen Miller was very clear about this. He states that the administration is actively looking at suspending habeas corpus. What that means is they can round up anybody. And we'll see the laws that are coming out right now that allow for them to round up pretty much anybody they want without this due process. Another place where they're attacking, besides habeas corpus, is the Alien Enemies Act. We've heard this in the news quite a bit. Alien Enemies Act is during an invasion, only an invasion, can a president detain or deport natives and citizens of another nation. It suspends the right to a hearing and allows for deportation based on country of birth or citizenship. An invasion must take place, and what's critical about this is the president does not have unfettered power to implement the Alien Enemies Act, to suspend this habeas corpus. It has to be declared and adopted by Congress. It's only been used twice in our country's history, and it's always been during wars that we've been involved in, World War I and World War II. World War II in particular is where they interned Japanese, German, and Italian Americans. And I think I think history has looked upon that time period in our history with disfavor. I would assume we all share that thought. What else is happening coming forward? There's a departure from precedent with regard to reasonable suspicion. This has gone up to the Supreme Court here recently, and the Supreme Court just upheld it without issuing an opinion. And what it means is right now, reasonable suspicion for an officer to stop you could be based on language, speaking Spanish with an accent, or improperly speaking Spanish, or speaking English with an accent, or having some indication that you are of Latino descent, the type of work you perform, those that do landscaping, housekeeping, that's enough. Presence in a particular location. They've gone to Lowe's where you have individuals that are looking for work that day and they're rounding them up there. Sensitive areas such as courthouses, churches, schools are no longer off limits at all. Immigration enforcement can't take place in those events. They've never been allowed for 160 years. Now they have.
Mr. Arona,
Purposely,
Mr. Arona, you have to limit it to 3 more minutes, okay? Go ahead. You can finish up.
I apologize.
You're fine.
The reason we go through all this is this council and the mayor may have to address whether you are going to adopt, enforce, and embrace the rule of law or whether you're not. What type of community are we going to be? And again, I'm not giving any opinion or arguing with regard to how immigration should take place. The laws are there. As a lawyer, I'm a slave to the laws. And the laws require these protections. If they don't want to give the protections, they need to amend the laws. They need to change the laws. So all I'm asking is that they follow them. And you will have possibly this decision on, do we engage and we participate in ICE's activities that we've gone through that clearly violate constitutional law, or do we not? Who are we as a Pueblo community? That Hopefully will never be before you. Hopefully it doesn't get to the point to where they're looking at the Pueblo airport. But as of right now, there's every indication that they are. And we're gonna have to decide what type of society we want to live in here in Pueblo. We say we're the home of heroes. Heroes that have fought, died for our rights under the Constitution. I'm a veteran myself. That's why I went in at 17 years old. Not Trump's interpretation, not Obama's interpretation, the Constitution, it's clear. It's clear. We got to decide whether we're going to follow rule of law or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morona. Council Flores.
Thank you for being here tonight and expanding on what the issue is. I think you made it very clear. I wanted to follow up on, again, I think you tried to define it. It's the short period of time that we gave you. But when we say that somebody crosses our border, is an undocumented individual, on a scale of any kind of criminal law, you've indicated that it's not a criminal offense, that it's a civil offense. Yet these people are being treated as though they've committed some huge crime the way they're being treated. So can you define again, how do we, when somebody commits murder, we charge them with murder. If somebody commits robbery, we charge them with robbery. When we charge somebody for being in the United States without documents, what is the scale here that we can treat these people like we're treating right now without any accountability? In fact, today, Stephen Miller, just 2 days ago, said, I'm sending out a message to our ICE agents this week that they have full immunity, which means ICE agents can act in impunity. Really, that's what he's saying. But let's talk about the crime again, that these people deserve to be treated this way.
Well, thank you for your question, Councilman Flores. I think it's an important question. If you look at the statutory scheme that governs immigration, it's really separate from the criminal scheme that we follow, both from the federal and the state jurisprudence, and it's considered what's called a status crime. It's illegal. You've got to go through the process. I think everybody agrees to that. And if it's a status that you're undocumented, that needs to be addressed. Our founding fathers gave us that answer on how to address that. It says, in order to ensure, one, that these fundamental rights that are a product of who we are as human beings and codified in the Constitution are recognized, you got to follow due process. If you're right, take them to court, prove what you need to prove, just like anything else, and then address that situation as it should. So it's not a murder and robbery as you've talked about, but my goodness, they sure are treated that way. And in many instances, they're treated worse, because even if someone is, if they bring charges for murder, there are a lot of constitutional safeguards in place, which are good. That's what we need. Those aren't even being provided to these individuals. And that's all we're arguing, is to give them what our founding fathers have recognized, what both Republican and Democratic administrations have upheld for decades, centuries, is due process needs to be afforded.
What do you think? What do you think happens to children that are separated from their parents? It seems to me that the children are being punished because of a bad decision maybe their parents made, but separating small children from their parents. And I know you're not mental health clinicians, but it seems to me that there is a lot of long-term trauma that those children are going to go through for the rest of their life. And it just seems so inhumane and so cruel that it goes beyond anything I can even fathom. But do you have any thoughts about that?
Thank you for your question, Councilman Flores. I think, again, that really touches on the horrendous outcome of some of these interpretations of the law and actual just disregard for the law. And I must say, in my research, I did find where President Trump, even he came in and said, you know, this separation of children from their families, I got to look at that again. And I believe he is taking steps to somehow address that. So he even sees that it's such an egregious and horrible situation. But the answer to your question is this: we have that solved. When we have minors in our community that have violated the law, then we have a procedure for them, different than adults. It's sensitive to the fact that they're kids, that they're youth. So again, cannot address this by simply throwing them in jail with everybody else and not affording them any due process. So we have something in place already. We've contemplated this. We've implemented it for decades. Just apply that also with humanity. Again, history will judge us. History will judge this council if it comes before them. And right now, it's clear. History, I believe, will say you have all of these safeguards and you chose to ignore them for political benefit.
One of my last questions here is, why are ICE agents why are they masked? Is it because they can recruit more ICE agents because they're ashamed of what they're doing? Or is there really a reason? You don't see any law enforcement officers with a mask. In fact, we even have cameras on our officers, and they have the same dangers that they do. Why are they being allowed to be masked? They don't present a really pretty picture to anyone that they're really well, you know, since they have full immunity, they can't be held accountable. But why do you what rule are they operating under?
Thank you for that question, Councilman Flores. That's an interesting one because it could be potentially violative of Title 8, Section 287.8, and that's requires immigration officers to identify themselves when they're either making a stop of someone or arresting them. And that's really for the public and the officer's safety. That's just a general good practice of good policing, and the brave men and women of Pueblo who dress up in their uniform and put their name badge on every day and police our streets are held to that standard. So I would imagine we would want our federal officers to be held to a similar standard, but they're not. And it's working its way through the court system. We'll see eventually how it turns up. But yeah, that's a very interesting question, and we'll just have to wait and see and give it some time.
My last question. We have such a shortage of officers everywhere. You know, we're down, I don't know whether it's 40, 45, 50, it fluctuates all the time. And while I was watching the Broncos yesterday, they kept putting up this ad because of the amount of money that the government has put in that beautiful bill. They are now recruiting directly to law enforcement officers with a promise of $50,000 bonus, probably because they're having a hard time recruiting people to do this dirty work. But it just, I don't think there's a question in there, but it just seems offensive to me that they're recruiting all over the United States with cities that can't afford to lose their own police force and promising them $50,000. It's kind of crazy to me. But anyway, thank you for being here and thank you for answering our questions.
Okay, Council Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Rona and Mr. Rona, for that presentation. I definitely learned a lot. One of the things that I learned are about those two House bills that you referenced to put in some protections that were the House bills in 2023. One of the questions that I've had for our state legislature representatives are around those protected spaces and places that you referenced around like schools, childcare facilities, things like, is that codified in state law? Do you know?
So beginning in 2011, there's a practice under that current administration to not have federal immigration enforcement in places of worship and in schools, at immigration court proceedings. What we've seen recently is that the current administration has walked that back. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing codified in state law that would then provide protection at schools or court proceedings or those places. So this is just a federal policy that's been implemented at the federal level. And then they come in, and then with participation of local state officers, they could potentially raid schools, and or they could pick up individuals at their immigration court proceedings as well.
Okay. The last time I spoke with one of our representatives, he was saying that those protected spaces and places were codified in the state law. So I can follow up with him later on.
So thank you for your question. I think it's a critical question, especially here in Pueblo. I've represented Chavez Huerta and Boys and Girls Club and other entities that are very, very concerned about this. I've drafted policies and procedures with regard to if ICE agents show up and so forth. So to me, even if it is codified in law, there doesn't seem to be an embrace of law with this administration. While the protections are there, I'll let you know that your community is preparing for ICE agents to go into the churches, into the schools, at court proceedings and so forth. And looking at the court proceedings, what's disturbing about that is, again, the administration understands this due process. They do, because what they'll do is when someone who is undocumented goes to their hearing like they're supposed to be part of and to hopefully get eventual citizenship, they're doing everything they're supposed to do under the law. They show up. When they come out of those hearings, they're arrested, and they're not kept in that jurisdiction. They're moved. They're flown to other jurisdictions, possibly Pueblo. The reason they do that is then they get them lost in the system. They can't show up for their next hearing. So now automatically they violated the law and they're no longer eligible for the path to citizenship. That was disturbing about them going into these court proceedings, because they understand the law, they understand due process, they understand it's afforded to them, but they will not only not recognize it, they'll figure out a way to deprive them of it.
Mr. McCain, I know that you gave an update at council work session a couple of weeks ago. Can you talk a little bit more about if the city is currently contracting with ICE or in the conversations to contract with ICE?
No and no. I mean, that's my update. There's been no conversations. There's been no contracting. There was an email that was sent out just more for information to the city of Walsenburg, to their city administration, but no. The answer is no. There's nothing.
And nothing on the horizon at all,
No.
no plans?
No. Nobody's reached out to us from ICE or the
Okay.
federal government or anybody.
And can you remind me when that email was sent?
August, the end of August
Okay.
through, I think, September 2nd or 4th, something like that.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay, any other comments? Any other questions? Okay, I think you complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, President Ayler, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS Section 24-6-402, parent 4, parent E. And the following additional details are provided for identification purposes. Instructing CIRSA with respect to settlement negotiations of pending claims.
Second.
President will second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll be back at 7. Okay, for the record, we're gonna continue at 7:10 PM. We just got out of executive session. Thank you.